You. Good night." She was gone. I followed into the hall. Below in the street I heard the rattle of her taxi. I went back into my room and sat down. I was upset and no mistake. Outside my windows the continuous symphony of the city played on, the buses, the trains, the never silent voices. I gazed out. What a tremendous acreage of dank brick houses and dank British souls. I felt horribly alone. I may add that I felt a bit frightened, as though that great city were slowly closing in on me. Who was this woman of mystery? What place had she held in the life, and perhaps in the death, of Captain Fraser-Freer? Why should she come boldly to my rooms and make her impossible demand? I resolved that, even at the risk of my own comfort, I would stick to the truth. And to that resolve I would have clung, had I not shortly received another visit, this one far more inexplicable, far more surprising than the first. It was about 9 o'clock when Walters tapped at my door and told me two gentlemen wished to see me. A moment later into my study walked Lieutenant Norman Fraser-Freer and a fine old gentleman with a face that suggested some faded portrait hanging on an aristocrat's wall. I had never seen him before. "I hope it is quite convenient for you to see us," said young Fraser-Freer. I assured him that it was. The boy's face was drawn and haggard. There was terrible suffering in his eyes, yet about him hung, like a halo, the glory of a great resolution. "May I present my father?" he said. "General Fraser-Freer, retired. We have come on a matter of supreme importance." The old man muttered something I could not catch. I could see that he had been hit hard by the loss of his elder son. I asked them to be seated. The general complied, but the boy walked the floor in a manner most distressing. "I shall not be long," he remarked. "Nor at a time like this is one in a mood to be diplomatic. I will only say, sir, that we have come to ask of you a very great favor indeed. You may not see fit to grant it. If that is the case, we can not well reproach you. But if you can—" "It is a great favor, sir," broke in the general. "And I am in the odd position where I do not know whether you will serve me best by granting it or by refusing to do so." "Father, please, if you don't mind—" The boy's voice was kindly but determined. He turned to me. "Sir, you have testified to the police that it was a bit past 7 when you heard in the room above the sounds of the struggle which you understand." In view of the mission of the caller who had departed a scant hour previously, the boy's question startled me. "Such was my testimony," I answered. "It was the truth." "Naturally," said Lieutenant Fraser-Freer. "But as a matter of fact, we are here to ask that you alter your testimony. Could you, as a favor to us who have suffered so cruel a loss, a favor we should never forget, could you not make the hour of that struggle half after 6?" I was quite overwhelmed. Your reasons?" I managed at last to ask. "I am not able to give them to you in full," the boy answered. "I can only say this. It happens that at 7 o'clock last Thursday night I was dining with friends at the Savoy, friends who would not be likely to forget the occasion." The old general leaped to his feet. "Norman!" he cried. "I can not let you do this thing. I simply will not—" "Hush, Father," said the boy wearily. "We have threshed it all out. You have promised." The old man sank back into the chair and buried his face in his hands. "If you are willing to change your testimony," young Fraser-Freer went on to me, "I shall at once confess to the police that it was I who murdered my brother. They suspect me. They know that late last Thursday afternoon I purchased a revolver, for which, they believe, at the last moment I substituted the knife. They know that I was in debt to him, that we had quarreled about money matters, that by his death I, and I alone, could profit." He broke off suddenly and came toward me, holding out his arms with a pleading gesture I can never forget. "Do this for me!" he cried. "Let me confess! Let me end this whole horrible business here and now!" Surely no man had ever to answer such an appeal before. "Why?" I found myself saying, and over I repeated it. "Why? Why?" The lieutenant faced me, and I hope never again to see such a look in a man's eyes. "I loved him!" he cried. "That is why. For his honor, for the honor of our family, I am making this request of you. Believe me, it is not easy. I can tell you no more than that. You knew my brother?" "Slightly." "Then, for his sake, do this thing I ask." "But murder?" "You heard the sounds of a struggle. I shall say that we quarreled, that I struck in self defense." He turned to his father. "It will mean only a few years in prison. I can bear that," he cried. "For the honor of our name." The old man groaned, but did not raise his head. The boy walked back and forth over my faded carpet like a lion caged. I stood, wondering what answer I should make. "I know what you are thinking," said the lieutenant. "You can not credit your ears. But you have heard correctly. And now, as you might put it, it is up to you. I have been in your country." He smiled pitifully. "I think I know you Americans. You are not the sort to refuse a man when he is sore beset, as I am." I looked from him to the general and back again. "I must think this over," I answered, my mind going at once to Colonel Hughes. "Later, say to morrow, you shall have my decision." "To morrow," said the boy, "we shall both be called before Inspector Bray. I shall know your answer then, and I hope with all my heart it will be yes." There were a few mumbled words of farewell, and he and the broken old man went out. As soon as the street door closed behind them, I hurried to the telephone and called a number Colonel Hughes had given me. It was with a feeling of relief that I heard his voice come back over the wire. I told him I must see him at once. He replied that by a singular chance he had been on the point of starting for my rooms. In the half hour that elapsed before the coming of the colonel, I walked about like a man in a trance. He was barely inside my door when I began pouring out to him the story of those two remarkable visits. He made little comment on the woman's call beyond asking me whether I could describe her, and he smiled when I mentioned lilac perfume. At the mention of young Fraser Freer's preposterous request he whistled. "By gad!" he said. "Interesting! Most interesting! I am not surprised, however. That boy has the stuff in him." "But what shall I do?" I demanded. Colonel Hughes smiled. "It makes little difference what you do," he said. "Norman Fraser Freer did not kill his brother, and that will be proved in due time." He considered for a moment. "Bray, no doubt, would be glad to have you alter your testimony, since he is trying to fasten the crime on the young lieutenant. On the whole, if I were you, I think that when the opportunity comes to morrow I should humor the inspector." "You mean tell him I am no longer certain as to the hour of that struggle?" "Precisely. I give you my word that young Fraser Freer will not be permanently incriminated by such an act on your part. And incidentally you will be aiding me." "Very well," said I. "But I don't understand this at all." No, of course not. I wish I could explain to you, but I can not. I will say this: the death of Captain Fraser Freer is regarded as a most significant thing by the War Office. Thus it happens that two distinct hunts for his assassin are under way, one conducted by Bray, the other by me. Bray does not suspect that I am working on the case, and I want to keep him in the dark as long as possible. You may choose which of these investigations you wish to be identified with." "I think," said I, "that I prefer you to Bray." "Good boy!" he answered. "You have not gone wrong. And you can do me a service this evening, which is why I was on the point of coming here, even before you telephoned me. I take it that you remember and could identify the chap who called himself Archibald Enwright, the man who gave you that letter to the captain?" "I surely could," said I. "Then, if you can spare me an hour, get your hat." And so it happens, lady of the Carlton, that I have just been to Limehouse. You do not know where Limehouse is, and I trust you never will. It is picturesque. It is revolting. It is